Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about grinding and hitting failure, when it's good to do these things and when it's bad to do these things, because there's a lot of confusion about this. You have people who come up with these ideas of like you should always be going 100%, you should always try to grind out reps, you should always hit muscle failure, you should always do extended sets. And there are people on the other extreme who say you shouldn't ever train to failure. Training to failure is training for failure. So let's actually clarify this, because actually both groups of people are wrong. Both people have good points, but they're both wrong. The truth is actually somewhere in between. So I'm going to relax, get in my place of Zen, and let's explain this a little further so that people actually understand that not training to failure and training to failure are both valuable tools in the right context of your training. All right, let's demystify this a little bit while I work on this stuff. All right, first of all, the simple cliff notes, because a lot of people don't like the long videos. They don't want all the information, they just want the cliff. So let's jump to that. They don't got to watch a 10-minute video. Grinding with anything under about 5 reps, other than when you're about to deload, is a bad thing. You don't grind reps if you can avoid it. Again, other than when you're reaching the end of a training phase and you're about to deload with 5 reps or less, and never ever hit failure on anything less than about 6 reps. You shouldn't be training to failure for 5 rep or lower sets. Again, occasionally a 5 rep. 5 is your minimum if you're at the end of some sort of peak or reset or deload. Might be okay, but during your regular training phases, absolutely not. Now, as far as training to failure goes, with really high reps, it's generally pretty beneficial. So there's your cliff notes out of the way. The guys who don't like the longer videos can bail out now. There's your information. Let's discuss this a little further for people who want to understand it. All right, first of all, the grinding in. The problem with grinding, usually when you're doing 5 reps or lower, you're training for strength, and when you get to 3 reps or lower, you're training for peak power, maximum power. Pretty self-explanatory. Power means how fast you can move that damn weight. Explosive power, moving a heavy weight and moving it down quickly. That's power. When you train and you grind and the rep is slow and you're having to strain out and take 2 or 3 seconds to lock a weight, we call that grinding. That trains you to move a weight more slowly. It's a bad thing for training for speed and power. If you're trying to get as powerful as possible, you're training yourself to move a weight more slowly. That's not beneficial. When you see some of the world records, and whether it's weightlifting or powerlifting, oftentimes that world record, when they hit it, they lock it smooth and fast and it looks like an opener. It doesn't even look like a max sometimes. And that's because they are so explosive and so powerful that they can lift a weight. They can lift a personal record and a world record sometimes this fast. And that's because they have trained for speed and power. And sometimes if the weight slows down, they miss it. And so what you don't want to do is train your nervous system or your motor patterns to move a weight slowly. That's not beneficial to being powerful and hitting explosive bursts of power for a 1 rep max. It's just not beneficial to that. Don't want to do it. And if you wanted metabolic fatigue by doing it slowly, you wouldn't be training with heavy weights and low reps anyways. So it's pretty counterproductive to do those things. Now, the same thing comes into play when it comes to training to failure. The benefit of training to muscle failure is that it can induce large amounts of metabolic fatigue. All right, metabolic fatigue is one of the things that causes muscle growth. There's 2 main things that you can do to increase muscle growth. They increase the size of your muscle fibers. All right, besides drugs, we're talking stuff you do actually in the gym. So don't take it literally that there's only 2 things. There are generally 2 things you do in training that increase muscle size. You either increase tension, mechanical tension, which means the weight you lift. You go from 300 pounds to 305 pounds. Go from 100 kilos to 101 kilos. You increase tension. Mechanical tension makes muscle fibers grow. It has to lift more weight. Through the same range of motion with the same bar pass, same technique, the muscle tends to get thicker from it. The fibers thicken up as a defense mechanism, right? That's one pathway by which you induce growth. The other major pathway is, of course, metabolic fatigue. Well, what's metabolic fatigue? That means to where you've done a high enough workload that you've accumulated so much fatigue in the muscle that the slow twitch fibers are starting to get tired. The upper threshold fibers, the fast twitch fibers say, hey, I can't work anymore. I had to kick in because we started doing a bunch of reps and the weight got too heavy for the endurance fibers, so I had to kick in and I can only do a few reps. I'm tired. I'm done. You build up waste products in the muscle. Well, that metabolic fatigue still hits the upper threshold fibers. Inducing metabolic fatigue still taxes all the fibers that can produce power, that the ones that grow easiest, the ones that can grow the thickest, they get recruited and get exhausted. Now, muscle failure isn't necessary to exhaust them, but it is a tool that ensures that you exhausted them. Meaning, if you're doing anything over 7 reps and you reach muscle failure, true muscle failure, where the muscle burns, anything from about 7 reps up to about 15, if you do it by the muscle just burning out and giving up, again, accumulation of waste products with a weight that started pretty easy, because on that kind of weight, you don't actually need the upper threshold fibers for the first few reps. The faster twitch fibers don't even usually kick all the way in, not all of them, because you don't need them. But once the others start to get just a little fatigued, they say, okay, this is getting heavy, we're building up fatigue, we need to kick in these upper threshold fibers through rate coding. And when you do, they can only do a few reps and then they get fatigued. Well, you get to a point to where the muscle just wears out. It's done. It's called muscle failure. You can't lift another rep, even without cheating. And if you're cheating, you're taking tension off the bar. So you're not lifting the same weight. But you can't do it with the same weight anymore. You've reached muscle failure. Well, muscle failure also taxes those upper threshold fibers, all those fibers that grow easiest. It taxes them. They get tired. Well, if they get tired, your body knows that they got used, and it's going to need to make you grow also, because you tried to lift a weight that you weren't strong enough to lift. Sure, you lifted it a few times, but that built up metabolites and things, and the muscle got exhausted, and you still hit the upper threshold fibers, and your body, actually you hit all the fibers. You exhausted a lot of the even intermediate and endurance-based fibers. That's one reason higher reps tend to be pretty good for hypertrophy. They tend to hypertrophy sometimes a wider range of muscle fibers. Now, that's not that big of a deal, because a lot of those fibers, they also fatigue, don't grow as big or as fast as the other fibers. So technically, they're not adding as much muscle mass as you would think. You're just getting sometimes a little more. But if you're seeking maximum size, you have to take that kind of thing seriously, because you're trying to get everything as big as possible, not just the strength-oriented fibers. So you can get a little more size that way sometimes. So that's one reason that's a popular method to grow, is to do high reps to failure. But by reaching the muscle failure, you're ensuring that you fatigue those fibers. Is it necessary to fatigue them? No. But is it an insurance policy? Yeah. And that's kind of what you're doing. So you're just trying to get an insurance policy there to make sure that you fatigue them. And that will do it. If it's a heavy enough weight and it's, something below about a 15 rep max, and you're not doing it just through sheer exhaustion, yeah, it's going to ensure that you hit those upper threshold fibers, that you exhaust them, that you're going to grow a wide variety of muscle fibers. So metabolic fatigue through muscle failure is a valuable tool at that point. Now, the downside to, of course, muscle failure training is that it can fatigue your body and it can reduce the frequency at which you train. Well, the way around that, and what a lot of guys have done who don't do block periodization, they've learned to manipulate that. Because what we found is that training to failure with the lower reps, like 5 reps and less, doesn't induce metabolic fatigue the same way. You don't get the benefits from the high reps. All it does is potentially hurt you and slow down your recovery. So it's better to not hit failure with lower reps. But what happens when you hit that failure, it slows down recovery, right? So it makes it a little harder to make muscle gains, or to train again sooner, which of course makes it harder to gain muscle. But that's where undulating periodization comes in, and concurrent training is the way a lot of guys have found around that, who don't want to do like block style periodization. They rotate the rep ranges through the week, meaning you can't hit all that metabolic fatigue again, but you could come in and train the heavier weight, right? You can train the heavier weight on different days. And that doesn't require you to hit muscle failure, and it doesn't induce the same amount of metabolic fatigue that you got from doing the higher reps to failure. So this, again, people understanding this is where a lot of this concurrent style training has come from. And that's one of the reasons it's a pretty effective method for gaining size. Even though I'm a fan of block periodization, I'll be the first to admit concurrent style training has benefits to muscle growth, but concurrent style training doesn't allow you to hit failure on all your work days. What you do is your higher rep days, you come in and hit failure, maximize that metabolic fatigue, but you don't fatigue the peripheral nervous system the same way that you do with heavy weights. So you could come in with the heavy weights, fatigue your peripheral nervous system, but if you don't hit muscle failure, you're still hitting the upper threshold fibers, Still working those explosive motor patterns, still getting bigger, still getting stronger, but it doesn't hit the same recovery pathways that the higher rep training does. They're a little different. And so you can rotate through them back and forth on different days. And as long as you only hit failure on the high rep days, it's actually quite a beautiful way to train. But again, it kind of goes back to the point of knowing when to hit failure and when to not hit failure. And ultimately, the best programs that incorporate muscle failure are the ones to where you only hit it not only on high rep days, but only on days where you do high reps. And I guess that's another topic completely of why you don't want to mix the two in the same workout. A whole nother topic I guess I can cover at a later time. But generally speaking, it's the fact that you're trying to tax different recovery systems so that you can get back in and train again more often. Now, someone who doesn't want to train more than twice a week or something, sure, they could come in and they could train both in the same session and still, it'd probably maximize on it well. But guys who are wanting to get in and do either really hardcore full body 3 days a week, or they're wanting to push any sort of high volume 4 days a week or 5 days a week, you're going to need to do some sort of concurrent training. And again, it goes back to the point of if you only hit muscle failure on your high rep days, you're going to be able to train more often. You're going to recover enough to train more often that you can come in and hit heavier workouts. And by that same token, if you don't hit muscle failure on your heavy workouts, your peripheral nervous system recovers more quickly. And that's the thing that people need to realize. It just isn't necessary or even beneficial to hit failure on low reps. It can actually reduce your strength, reduce your recovery, or not necessarily reduce strength, but cause strength gains to come slower. Well, slower strength gains are never desired when you're doing it while training at the same frequency and volume. You know, you're like, well, I'm going to train just as hard or harder to get less strength gains. Well, that doesn't make sense. Nobody wants to do that. If you want to incorporate training to failure, frequently, I think concurrent style training, for hypertrophy at least, is the best approach to it. Just my opinion, but also the opinion of quite a few experts in the field. Quite a few PhDs who are also coaches do agree with that statement. Known quite a few who do. But yeah, that allows you to know what days to train on failure and which not to. But in general, guys, do not hit grinders or train to failure with really low reps. It's not beneficial to you the same way it is with high reps. It doesn't give you that same insurance policy. You get the insurance policy on the low rep days just by lifting heavy. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.